The airport gate was crowded, loud and tense, but nobody expected the explosion that was about to happen at Gate 44. Janice Miller, a gate agent with a reputation for bullying, took one look at Aris Thorne and decided she didn't belong in first class. Janice mocked her, humiliated her, and even called the police to have her dragged away in handcuffs. She thought she was just kicking off another economy passenger trying to sneak an upgrade. She was wrong. Dead wrong. When Aris finally reached into her jacket, she didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a gold-encased federal badge that froze the entire terminal. What happened next wasn't just justice. It was total destruction. You do not want to miss how this ends. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only frequent flyers seem to notice. It was 6:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the peak of the frantic evening rush. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Terminal 4, the November rain lashed against the glass, blurring the red and white lights of the tarmac into smears of color. Dr. Aris Thorne stood near the pillar of Gate B-22, adjusting the collar of her oversized charcoal gray hoodie. She was tired. It was a bone-deep exhaustion that settled into her marrow, the result of a 72-hour undercover operation in Berlin that had gone sideways before, finally righting itself. She hadn't slept in 2 days. She wasn't wearing her usual tailored power suits or the heels that clicked with authority on the marble floors of the Department of Justice headquarters. Today, she was in leggings, scuffed sneakers, and a hoodie that had seen better days. She looked like a tired college student, or perhaps a weary mother. She certainly didn't look like one of the highest-ranking special investigators for the Office of the Inspector General, and that was exactly the problem. Aris clutched her phone, the digital boarding pass glowing on the screen. Seat 1A, a last-minute upgrade booked by the director himself as an apology for the Berlin mess. Get some sleep, Aris. Champagne and a lie-flat bed. You earned it. She exhaled slowly, watching the gate agents bustle behind the counter. There were 2 of them. One was a young man, barely 20, looking overwhelmed as he typed furiously. The other was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of granite and bitterness. Her name tag read Janice. She had blonde hair sprayed into a helmet so rigid it probably defied aerodynamics, and she was currently snapping at an elderly man who had asked about the pre-boarding time. "Sir, I told you. We board when I say we board. Sit down or I'll check your carry-on right now," Janice barked, not even looking up from her screen. The old man shuffled away, looking defeated. Aris frowned. She had been observing Janice for the last 20 minutes. The woman wielded her scanner like a weapon. She had rolled her eyes at a young mother struggling with a stroller, ignored a question from a foreign tourist, and was now glaring at the waiting passengers as if they were cattle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Janice's voice screeched over the PA system, causing several people to wince. "We are now beginning boarding for Flight 882 to London Heathrow. We are inviting our first-class passengers and Diamond Medallion members to board at this time. Zone 1 only. If you are not Zone 1, do not approach the podium. I repeat, do not approach." Aris picked up her battered leather duffel bag. It was expensive, Italian leather, vintage, but it was worn, and to the untrained eye, it looked like something picked up at a thrift store. She moved toward the priority lane. The carpet in the priority lane was red, a small psychological trick to make the high-paying customers feel special. Aris stepped onto it. She was the 3rd person in line. The first 2, a businessman in a bespoke suit and a woman dripping in Louis Vuitton, were scanned through with a saccharine smile from Janice. "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Henderson. Enjoy the champagne," Janice cooed, her voice unrecognizable from the bark she'd used on the elderly man. Then, Aris stepped up to the podium. She held out her phone, the QR code bright and ready. "Good evening," Aris said, her voice raspy from lack of sleep, but polite. Janice didn't scan the phone. She didn't even look at the screen. Her eyes raked over Aris, starting at the messy bun on top of her head, down the oversized hoodie, past the leggings, and landing on the scuffed sneakers. Janice let out a short, sharp sigh through her nose. It was a sound of pure dismissal. "Zone 1 only, sweetie," Janice said, her hand hovering over the scanner, but not taking the phone. "Economy boarding is in 20 minutes. You need to wait over there." She pointed a manicured finger toward the crowded general seating area. Aris blinked. She didn't move. "I know. I'm in Zone 1. Seat 1A. Janice finally looked her in the eye. The look wasn't one of customer service. It was a look of profound condescension. "Check your ticket again. This is for first class. The upgrades don't clear for staff travel or economy standby until everyone else is on." "I'm not staff travel," Aris said, her voice hardening slightly. "And I'm not standby. I have a confirmed ticket." "Look," Janice said, dropping the customer service facade entirely. She leaned over the podium, her voice dropping to a loud whisper that was meant to be heard by the people lining up behind Aris. "I don't have time for this game. You people always try to sneak into the priority line thinking I won't notice. I noticed. Now move, or I'm going to move you to the very back of the plane." Aris felt that familiar heat rise in her chest, the cold fire of injustice. She had faced cartel leaders, corrupt senators, and armed insurgents. She wasn't going to be intimidated by a gate agent with a complex. "Scan the code," Aris said, holding the phone closer to the reader. "If it rejects, I'll walk away. Just scan it." Janice crossed her arms. "No." The air around the gate seemed to vanish. The silence that fell over the immediate area was heavy. Behind Aris, a tall man in a navy trench coat cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me," the man said. "Can we get moving? I have a meeting in London." Janice beamed at the man behind Aris, offering him an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm just dealing with a passenger who refuses to follow instructions. We'll have you on board in a jiffy." She turned back to Aris, her face twisting into a scowl. "You are holding up paying customers. Step aside. Now." Aris planted her feet. "I am a paying customer. You are refusing to board me based on my appearance. That is a violation of airline policy, and frankly, it's discriminatory." Janice let out a laugh. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Discriminatory? Oh, honey, don't pull that card with me. This isn't about what you look like. It's about facts. And the fact is, first-class tickets cost $12,000. You really expect me to believe you dropped 12 grand looking like that?" She gestured vaguely at Aris's outfit. "My attire is irrelevant," Aris stated calmly. "My ticket is valid." "Let me see it then," the young agent next to Janice said, trying to intervene. He reached for Aris's phone. "I can just check the PNR." "Don't you dare, Kevin," Janice snapped at him. The boy recoiled as if she'd burned him. "She's not jumping the queue on my watch. If we scan her, the system logs her as boarded, and then it's a whole paperwork nightmare to get her off when we realize she's in seat 34E. I know how these scams work. She's got a screenshot of an old ticket, or she's using an app to fake the QR code." Janice turned back to Aris. "I'm going to count to 3. If you aren't out of my line, I'm marking you as a refusal to transport. Do you know what that means? It means you don't fly today. Not to London, not anywhere. You go home. I suggest you check the manifest," Aris said, her voice dropping an octave. She was slipping into agent mode, the voice she used during interrogations. It was precise, cold, and dangerous. If you check the manifest for seat 1A, you will see the name Aris Thorne. If you refuse me boarding without cause, you are interfering with a federally booked itinerary." Janice's eyes narrowed. The word federally seemed to annoy her rather than warn her. "Oh, so you're a Fed now? What, CIA, FBI?" she mocked, looking at the people in line for validation. A few passengers chuckled nervously. Others looked uncomfortable. "I'm asking you one last time," Aris said. "Scan the boarding pass." Janice slammed her hand down on the counter. "Security!" she yelled, waving at a TSA officer who was walking past the corridor about 50 feet away. "Hey, we need assistance at gate 22, the crowd murmured. People had their phones out now. The cameras were rolling. Aris noticed a teenage girl recording from the waiting area, and another man in a business suit holding his phone up in the line. Good, Aris thought. Let them record. Janice turned back to Aris with a smug, triumphant grin. You wanted to play big shot? Fine. Now you can explain to the police why you're harassing airline staff and trespassing in a secure boarding zone. I'm not harassing anyone, Aris said, keeping her hands visible and relaxed. I am trying to board my flight. You're disrupting the peace, Janice spat, and I have the right to deny boarding to anyone who displays aggression, and I feel very threatened right now. Aris looked at Janice. The woman was at least 4 inches taller than Aris and outweighed her by 50 pounds. Aris hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved. Threatened? Aris repeated incredulously. Yes. You're aggressive. Your tone is hostile. Janice picked up the microphone again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pausing boarding for a moment due to a security incident. Please remain patient while we remove a disruptive passenger. She said it over the loudspeaker. She publicly branded Aris a threat. That was the mistake. That was the point of no return. The TSA officer, a tired-looking man named Greg, jogged over. He looked from Janice to Aris. What's the problem, Janice? Greg asked. He sounded like he had dealt with Janice before. She's refusing to leave the priority lane, Greg. She's blocking first-class passengers. She's aggressive, she's shouting, and she's refusing to show valid ID, Janice lied effortlessly. The speed at which the lies tumbled from her mouth was impressive in a sociopathic sort of way. I have my ID right here, Aris said, holding out her passport. And my boarding pass. Greg reached for the passport. Mum, if I could just see... Don't bother, Greg, Janice interjected. I've already cancelled her. She's off the flight. I want her escorted out of the terminal. She's causing a scene. Mum, Greg said to Aris, if the agent has denied you boarding, you have to leave the gate area. You can take it up with customer service at the front desk. Officer, Aris said, locking eyes with him. I am a ticketed passenger. This agent has refused to scan my ticket because she believes I don't look like I can afford it. She has not checked my ID. She has not checked the computer. She is profiling me. I am protecting the safety of this flight, Janice shrieked. She said she's a federal agent. Impersonating an officer is a felony, Greg. Arrest her. Greg looked at Aris skeptically. The hoodie. The sneakers. Did you say you're a federal agent, Mom? I said my ticket was federally booked, Aris corrected. But since we are discussing credentials... See? Janice pointed a shaking finger. She's backpedaling. She's a liar. Get her out of here before I call the real cops. I think that's a great idea, Aris said. The calm in her voice was unnerving. Call the Port Authority police. In fact, call the supervisor for the airport police. Ask for Sergeant Miller or Lieutenant O'Connell. Janice laughed. Oh, you know names? You think dropping names is going to save you? You're going to jail, honey. Janice grabbed the landline phone behind the desk and punched in a code. Dispatch, this is Janice at B-22. I have a 1078. Disruptive passenger, refusing to leave, impersonating law enforcement. Send the boys. Yeah, she's hostile. She slammed the phone down. The businessman behind Aris stepped forward. Look, I don't know what's going on, but can't you just scan her phone? If it beeps, it beeps. If it doesn't, she goes. Why are we waiting? Sir, stay back for your own safety, Janice warned him. This woman is unstable. Aris turned to the businessman. I apologize for the delay, sir. Don't talk to the passengers, Janice yelled. Aris turned back to Janice. The fatigue was gone now, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. She mentally catalogued every infraction: denied boarding without cause, defamation of character, false police report, public humiliation, and likely a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. But there was something else. Aris knew that the FAA had been cracking down on ground staff power trips. She also knew that the airline, Royal Horizon Air, was currently under investigation for inflating passenger lists to hide revenue gaps. Aris wasn't investigating the airline directly. Her department handled internal corruption within government agencies, but she knew the statutes. Janice, Aris said softly, I'm going to give you one chance to fix this. One chance to save your job and your pension. Scan the ticket, apologize, and let me board. Janice leaned over the counter, her face inches from Oris. You threaten me again, and I'll make sure you're banned from every airline in this country. You are nothing. You are a disruption. And in 5 minutes, you're going to be an inmate. The sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder. The blue lights flashed against the rainy windows. Here they come, Janice smirked. Bye-bye, sweetie. Aris stood her ground. She reached into her pocket. Hand out of your pocket, Janice screamed, jumping back as if Aris had a grenade. She's got a weapon. Greg, she's got a weapon. Greg put his hand on his taser. Ma'am, keep your hands visible. Aris slowly, very slowly, withdrew her hand. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a small, black leather wallet. The heavy boots of the Port Authority police thundered down the jet bridge hallway. 3 officers, 2 men and a woman. Leading them was a burly sergeant with a mustache that looked like it had its own zip code. What's the situation? The sergeant boomed. Her! Janice pointed, playing the victim perfectly. She even managed to squeeze out a fake tear. She threatened me. She said she has a weapon. She claimed to be a Fed. She's crazy, officer. The sergeant turned to Oris. He put his hand on his holster. Ma'am, drop the wallet and put your hands behind your head. Now. The entire gate held its breath. The cameras were zooming in. This was the moment Janice had wanted. The total humiliation of the woman in the hoodie. Aris didn't drop the wallet. Instead, she flipped it open with a snap of her wrist. The gold badge inside caught the fluorescent light. It wasn't a fake. It wasn't a party favor. It was the heavy, intricate, undeniable shield of the Department of Justice. Below it, an ID card with a holographic seal. Special Agent Aris Thorne, she announced, her voice ringing clear across the gate area. Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, Washington, D.C. She looked at the sergeant. And, Sergeant, you're arresting the wrong person. The silence that followed Aris's declaration was heavier than the humid air outside. The sergeant, whose name tag read Miller, no relation to Janice, thankfully, squinted at the badge. He had been a cop for 20 years. He knew what a fake badge looked like. He knew the weight of cheap metal versus issued brass. And he knew the Department of Justice seal. He stepped closer, his hand moving away from his gun. He leaned in, inspecting the holographic overlay on the ID card beneath the shield. Special Investigator. Clearance level. Top secret at SCI. Sergeant Miller exhaled, a long puff of air that signaled he realized how close he had just come to a career-ending mistake. He looked at Aris, really looked at her this time, past the hoodie. He saw the posture, the steady hands, the eyes that were currently dissecting him. "Stand down," Miller barked to his officers. "Sarge?" the rookie officer asked, confused. "I said stand down. Holster your weapons. Now." Miller turned back to Aris. His demeanor shifted from aggressive to professional in a nanosecond. "Agent Thorne, I apologize. We were informed of a violent passenger with a weapon." "I am aware of what you were informed," Aris said, snapping the wallet shut and slipping it back into her hoodie. "And as you can see, the only weapon I have is my identification and a boarding pass for seat 1A. "It's a fake!" Janice shrieked from behind the podium. "Don't fall for it! She bought it online! I saw a website that sells those. Arrest her!" Sergeant Miller turned to Janice slowly. His face was red, not from exertion, but from anger. "Janice, shut up!" "Excuse me," Janice gasped, clutching her pearls. "I am the victim here. She threatened me." "Did she?" Miller asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Because you told dispatch she had a gun. You said weapon. You initiated a code red response in an international terminal. Do you have any idea the resources you just wasted? Do you have any idea the liability you just opened up for the Port Authority?" She reached into her pocket aggressively," Janice stammered, her face flushing pink. "I felt threatened. It's the same thing." "It is not the same thing," Aris interjected calmly. She stepped forward, crossing that invisible line Janice had forbidden her to cross. Janice shrank back, realizing for the first time that the power dynamic had inverted. "Sergeant," Aris said, turning her back on Janice to address the police. "I am currently traveling on official business. My itinerary is flagged in the DHS system. If this agent had bothered to scan my ticket or even check the manifest, she would have seen a Do Not Detain flag associated with my PNR. Instead, she profiled me, denied me boarding, publicly defamed me, and then committed a felony by filing a false police report claiming I was armed." Aris paused, letting the words sink in. "I want her name and employee number logged in your report, Sergeant, and I want the station manager here. Now." "I already called him," Janice spat, trying to regain her footing. "Mr. Sterling is coming, and when he hears how you abused his staff, you'll be banned for life. You think a little badge scares me? I'm union. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Aris said coldly. "I suggest you use it." At that moment, the crowd behind the rope line erupted into applause. Someone shouted, "Get her, lady!" The teenage girl who had been filming shouted, "I got it all on TikTok. She's lying, officer. The lady was super chill." Sergeant Miller looked at the crowd, then at Janice. "Janice, step away from the podium." "I will not. I have a flight to board." "Step away from the podium, or I will arrest you for obstruction of justice," Miller warned. "You called in a false gun threat. That's not a union grievance. That's a crime." Janice's mouth fell open. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. She stepped back, her hands trembling. "Fine," she hissed. "But when Mr. Sterling gets here, you're all fired." 5 minutes later, the crowd parted like the Red Sea for a man in an immaculate navy suit. Marcus Sterling, the station manager for Royal Horizon Air at JFK, walked with the brisk pace of a man who spent his life putting out fires. He was holding a tablet, his face a mask of practiced concern. He saw the police, the angry crowd, and Janice standing with her arms crossed, looking like a petulant child. And he saw Aris. He didn't know who she was yet, but he knew body language. He saw the way the police sergeant was deferring to the woman in the hoodie. Sterling was a smart man. He knew instantly that the woman in the hoodie was the most important person in the room. "What is going on here?" Sterling asked, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Mr. Sterling," Janice cried out, rushing toward him before anyone else could speak. "Thank God! This woman, this hooligan, she attacked me. She jumped the line, refused to show a ticket, screamed at me, and then pulled a badge and claimed to be the FBI. She's crazy! You have to ban her!" Sterling held up a hand to stop Janice. He turned to Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant, report." "We responded to a call from your agent regarding an armed subject," Miller said, his tone dry. "Upon arrival, we identified the subject as Special Agent Aris Thorne, Department of Justice. No weapon was found. The agent claims she was denied boarding and profiled. Witnesses corroborate that she was calm until your agent escalated." Sterling's eyes widened slightly. He turned to Aris. "Agent Thorne?" "Dr. Aris Thorne," she corrected. "And I assume you are the station manager?" "I am. Marcus Sterling." He extended a hand. Aris didn't take it. "Mr. Sterling," Aris said, her voice carrying to the onlookers, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully about the answer, because it will determine whether Royal Horizon Air faces a federal inquiry tomorrow morning." Sterling pulled his hand back, swallowing hard. "Okay. Does your airline policy instruct agents to deny boarding to first-class passengers based on their clothing? Specifically, does it allow agents to refuse to scan a valid ticket because the passenger is wearing a hoodie?" "No, absolutely not," Sterling said quickly. "We have no dress code for paying passengers." "Does your policy allow agents to publicly announce that a passenger is a security threat, simply because they asked for their ticket to be scanned?" "No, that is a violation of protocol." And finally, Aris stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Sterling, Janice, and the sergeant could hear. "Does your policy support filing a false police report claiming a federal officer has a gun, simply because your agent's ego was bruised?" Sterling turned to Janice. His face went pale. "Janice, did you say she had a gun?" "I said she had a weapon," Janice argued. "She had her hand in her pocket. It could have been anything. I was protecting the flight." "I have the dispatch log, Mr. Sterling," Sergeant Miller interrupted. She said, and I quote, "Subject is hostile and armed with a firearm." That is a direct quote. Sterling closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. He knew what this meant. This was a PR nightmare. It was a lawsuit. It was a federal incident. "Janice," Sterling said quietly, "get your things." "What?" Janice blinked. "Get your things. Leave the gate. Go to my office and wait for me." You're sending me away?" Janice's voice rose to a screech. "In front of her? In front of them?" She gestured to the passengers who were now openly laughing and jeering. "I have worked here for 15 years. You can't treat me like this." "You just committed a felony on company time, Janice," Sterling snapped, losing his cool. "Now get out of my sight before I let the sergeant arrest you right here." Janice looked around. She looked at the smirking passengers. She looked at the stone-faced police. And finally, she looked at Aris. Aris didn't smirk. She didn't smile. She just watched Janice with a look of absolute pity. "This isn't over," Janice whispered to Aris as she grabbed her purse. "You think you won? You're nobody. I'll sue you. I'll sue everyone." She stormed off the jet bridge, pushing past the passengers who booed her as she left. Sterling exhaled and turned back to Aris. "Dr. Thorne, I am deeply, deeply sorry. This is unacceptable. I will personally handle your boarding. I will upgrade you to, well, you're already in 1A. I will issue a full refund for your ticket, and I will add 50,000 miles to your account as a gesture of goodwill." Aris met Sterling's gaze, her expression cool and unwavering. "Mr. Sterling, that's a start. But she isn't an isolated problem. She's a symptom of a culture you've let rot. I watched her for 20 minutes. She bullied an elderly man, humiliated a mother, and treated passengers like an inconvenience. She's not just unprofessional, she's a liability." "She will be dealt with," Sterling vowed. "Please, let me get you on board. The plane is holding for you." Iris finally handed over her phone. He didn't even bother with the scanner. A few keystrokes, and he nodded. "You're cleared, Dr. Thorne. And I'm sorry." She picked up her duffel and gave Sergeant Miller a parting nod. "Thank you, Sergeant. Stay safe." "You too, Agent," he replied, tipping his cap. Walking down the jet bridge, Iris felt the adrenaline drain, replaced by the bone-deep fatigue she'd been keeping at bay. She wanted nothing more than champagne and a lie-flat bed. She thought the chaos was behind her. She was wrong. As she stepped into the first-class cabin, she turned left and froze. In seat 1B sat the man in the navy trench coat who'd been behind her earlier. He looked up, eyes flicking from her to the hoodie. "Unbelievable," he muttered loudly. "They actually let you on. Standards really have fallen." Iris stared at him. Middle-aged, expensive suit, radiating entitlement. "Excuse me?" she said. "I saw the whole thing," he sneered. "You bullied that poor gate agent, played the race card, flashed a fake badge, and forced your way into first class. It's disgusting." He slammed the call button. "Stewardess, I refuse to sit next to this thug." Iris almost laughed. She had just taken down one gatekeeper, and now she was facing another, one with money, ego, and a dangerous misunderstanding of his own power. "Sir," she said quietly, stowing her bag overhead, "you have no idea who I am. And for your sake, stop talking." "Oh, really? I'm Charles Vane. My father owns the firm that insures this airline. You breathe wrong near me, and I'll have your badge by morning." Iris sat in 1A, buckled in, and looked him dead in the eye. "Charles Vane," she repeated softly. "Good. I needed that name." Because Charles didn't know her Berlin operation, or that the money laundering case she was investigating had one name at the top: Vane Global Insurance. Karma wasn't coming. It was already seated in 1B. That was the missing link. Her team in DC had been tracking a series of shell companies moving dirty money through German banks, but they couldn't identify the signatory. They knew the money was tied to insurance payouts for accidents that looked suspiciously like arson, but the paper trail ended at a ghost corporation. "Listen to me," Vane hissed, slurring slightly. "The DOJ is sniffing around. I heard they sent some agent to Berlin last week, but they didn't find anything. The files are shredded. Once I move this last 10 million to the Cayman accounts, Vane Global is clear. We wash our hands of it." Iris didn't move a muscle. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her breathing remained slow and rhythmic. She was recording every word in her memory. Vane laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Yeah, I'm on the flight now, dealing with the usual incompetence. They let some gutter trash sit next to me. Probably an affirmative action upgrade. She's asleep now. Looks like she belongs in a shelter, not first class." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Don't worry about the gate agent," Vane said, waving his hand dismissively, knocking his empty glass over. "Janice?" "Yeah. She called me crying. I told her I'd take care of it. I'll call the CEO of Royal Horizon tomorrow. We insure them. We own them. I'll have that agent reinstated and promoted by Monday. And that federal agent who caused the scene? I'll have her badge revoked. Nobody embarrasses Charles Vane." Iris opened her eyes. She turned her head slowly to look at him. Vane caught her looking. He smirked, ending his call. Enjoying the view? Take a picture, sweetie. It lasts longer. Or are you just waiting to steal my wallet when I fall asleep? Aris sat up. She reached for the bottle of water on her tray table and took a sip. She looked calm, but inside, the pieces of the puzzle were locking together with a satisfying click. "Mr. Vane," Aris said, her voice conversational, "you seem very confident for a man traveling to a jurisdiction where wire fraud is an extraditable offense." Vane's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "You're going to Berlin to sign release forms for the accounts that were frozen on Tuesday," Aris said. "Specifically, the accounts held by Vanguard Holdings, which is a shell company for Vane Global Insurance." Vane went pale. The alcohol flush drained from his face instantly. How do you know that?" "Because," Aris said, leaning in closer, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm the agent they sent to Berlin. I'm the one who froze the accounts." Vane stared at her. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You? You look like a teenager. You're lying." "Am I?" Aris pulled out her phone. She wasn't supposed to use it for operations mid-flight, but this was an exception. She opened a secure app, typed in her biometric key, and turned the screen toward him. It was a digital copy of a subpoena. Subject: Charles Vane. Investigation: RICO, money laundering. "I was flying back to DC to file the paperwork to arrest you next week," Aris explained coolly. "I didn't have enough evidence to grab you in London. I needed the signature trail. But then, you decided to sit next to me. You decided to make a phone call on an unsecured network. You just confessed to obstruction of justice and money laundering on a plane full of witnesses." Vane lunged for her phone. Aris moved with the speed of a viper. She caught his wrist in mid-air, twisting it back until he yelped in pain. "Sit! Down!" she commanded. "You can't do this!" Vane hissed, trying to pull his hand back. "I'm an American citizen. We're in international airspace." "Actually," Aris checked her watch, "we just crossed into UK airspace, and under the extradition treaty between the US and the UK, I have jurisdiction to detain you until local authorities take over." She released his wrist, shoving him back into his seat. "Elena!" Aris called out firmly. The flight attendant rushed over, looking worried. "Is everything okay, Dr. Thorne?" "No," Aris said. "This passenger just assaulted a federal officer. I need you to notify the captain, request a priority landing at Heathrow, and tell them to have Scotland Yard waiting at the gate. Tell them it's Operation Glass House." Vane looked at Elena. "Don't listen to her. She's crazy. I'm Charles Vane. I can buy this plane." Elena looked at Vane, then at the spilled scotch, then at Oris's calm demeanor. She remembered how Vane had treated her for the last 5 hours. "I'll inform the captain immediately, Dr. Thorne," Elena said, turning on her heel. Vane sank back into his seat. He looked at the window. It was pitch black outside. There was nowhere to run. "You're going to regret this," Vane whispered, his voice trembling. "My lawyers will destroy you." Aris put her noise-cancelling headphones on. "Mr. Vane, after what I just recorded, you're going to need a lot more than lawyers. You're going to need a miracle." The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin of Flight 1882 shifted imperceptibly as the nose of the aircraft dipped, signaling the beginning of the initial descent into London Heathrow. To the other passengers, it was just the end of a long, luxurious flight. They were folding their newspapers, putting on their shoes, and finishing the last dregs of their coffees. But in row 1, the air was so thick with tension, it felt suffocating. Charles Vane sat in Seat 1B, a man who had spent his entire life believing he was the architect of his own reality. He was used to bending laws, people, and corporations to his will. But now, trapped in a metal tube hurtling through the stratosphere at 500 miles per hour, he realized he had lost control. The scotch he had consumed earlier, 4 glasses of it, was no longer providing a buzz. Instead, it had turned into a sour, acidic pit in his stomach. He looked at the window, staring into the abyss of the night sky, but all he could see was his own pale reflection staring back. He glanced sideways at Aris Thorne in seat 1A. She was infuriatingly calm. She had put away her phone and was currently reading the in-flight magazine, flipping a page with a casual, rhythmic swish. She looked small in that oversized hoodie, her legs curled up beneath her. It maddened him. How could this woman, this person he had dismissed as gutter trash less than 6 hours ago, hold his entire life in her hands? Vane's mind raced. He was a survivor. He was a shark. He just needed to negotiate. Everyone had a price. Federal agents were underpaid. He knew that. They drove used cars and lived in suburbs. He lived in penthouses and flew private, usually. He leaned across the center console, his voice a desperate, rasping whisper, so as not to alert the flight attendant, Elena, who was clearing trays a few rows back. "Look," Vane hissed, the smell of expensive alcohol and fear radiating off him. "Let's be adults here. You have a recording. Fine. You got me. But what is that recording really worth to you? A commendation? A plaque on a wall? A 2% raise next year?" Aris didn't look up from the magazine article about the best hiking trails in the Scottish Highlands. "Mr. Vane, you are interfering with a flight crew member's instructions to prepare for landing. Please sit back." "I can give you $2 million, Vane blurted out, the number hanging in the air between them. "Wire transfer, offshore, untraceable. You walk off this plane, you accidentally delete the file, or the phone gets corrupted. It happens all the time. $2 million. That's retirement money, Agent. That's never work another day in your life." Money. Aris finally turned her head. Her eyes were dark, tired, and devoid of greed. They held the terrifying weight of absolute certainty. "You think this is about money?" Aris asked softly. "You think I spent 3 days in Berlin, awake for 72 hours, digging through shredded documents in a freezing warehouse, for money?" "Everyone has a price," Vane insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. $5 million. That's my final offer. $5 million. Do you have any idea what you can do with that?" "I know exactly what you did for it," Oris countered, her voice dropping to a chill temperature. "I know about the nursing home in Florida that burned down because you cut corners on the sprinkler system inspections to save the insurance payout. I know about the 3 people who died in that fire, Mr. Vane. 2 of them were grandmothers. 1 was a nurse." Vane recoiled as if she had slapped him. That was never proven. That was an electrical fault. That was arson, masked as negligence, signed off by a subsidiary of Vane Global, Aris corrected him. "And the money you were laundering in Berlin? That was the payout from that policy. You profited from their deaths." She leaned in closer, invading his personal space for the first time. "My price isn't $5 million, Charles. My price is seeing you in a cage, and I'm getting it for free." Vane slumped back into his seat, defeated. The color drained from his face completely. He realized then that he wasn't dealing with a bureaucrat. He was dealing with an executioner. The plane banked sharply. The intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds, speaking from the flight deck." The pilot's voice was serious, lacking the usual cheerful tourist banter. "We have been granted priority clearance for an immediate approach into Heathrow. We will be landing on runway 27 right. Due to a security protocol requested by ground authorities, we will not be taxiing to a terminal gate immediately. We will be parking at a remote stand where local authorities will meet the aircraft. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until instructed otherwise." A ripple of confusion went through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances. Remote stand? Local authorities? "What's going on?" the businessman in 2A asked loudly. "I have a connection to Dubai. I can't be stuck on the tarmac." Elena, the flight attendant, walked down the aisle with a practiced, calming smile, though her eyes darted nervously toward row 1. "Please remain calm, sir. It's just a routine procedure. We will have everyone on their way shortly." Vane grabbed the armrests, his knuckles turning white. He knew what remote stand meant. It meant they were isolating the plane so he couldn't run. They were boxing him in. The landing gear deployed with a heavy mechanical thud that vibrated through the floorboards. To Vane, it sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. The descent felt interminable. Every bump of turbulence made Vane flinch. He looked at his phone, contemplating smashing it, but Aris's voice cut through his thoughts. "Don't even think about it," she said, without looking at him. "The cloud backup of my recording finished 10 minutes ago via the satellite link. Destroying your phone now just adds tampering with evidence to your charge sheet. And honestly, looking at the list of charges, you don't need any more." The wheels touched the tarmac with a screech of rubber and a roar of reverse thrusters. The plane shuddered, slowing down rapidly. Vane felt the deceleration pull him forward against his seatbelt, a physical manifestation of his momentum coming to a violent halt. The aircraft didn't turn toward the glittering lights of Terminal 5. Instead, it veered left, taxiing toward the darker, industrial side of the airport, past the cargo hangars and the maintenance bays. Out the window, the rain-slicked tarmac reflected the flashing blue lights that were waiting for them. Not one car. Not two. There were 4 police vehicles, 2 marked cruisers and 2 black SUVs with blue lights strobing in the grille. Standing next to them were figures in high-visibility yellow jackets. "Oh God," Vane whispered. Tears began to well in his eyes. "Please, I have a family. My reputation." "You should have thought about that before you bullied a gate agent for doing her job," Aris said, unbuckling her seatbelt as the "Fasten Seatbelt" sign pinged off. The plane came to a complete stop. The engines spooled down to a high-pitched whine. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice returned, "please remain seated. We are opening the forward door for authorities to board." The sound of the external stairs locking into place against the fuselage echoed through the cabin. Then, the heavy locking mechanism of the cabin door turned. The door swung open, letting in the damp, chilly London air and the smell of jet fuel. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police boarded first. They were imposing, wearing tactical vests over their uniforms. Behind them walked a man in a sharp grey suit, holding a folder. This was Detective Inspector Graham of Scotland Yard's Serious Fraud Office. They didn't look left or right. They had a target. They walked straight into the first-class cabin. The other passengers watched in stunned silence. The businessman in 2A had his phone out, recording. The woman in 2B was clutching her pearls. Inspector Graham stopped at row 1. He looked down at Charles Vane, who was now trembling uncontrollably. "Charles Edward Vane?" Graham asked, his voice crisp and authoritative, carrying a distinct British clip. Vane didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat had constricted. "I am Detective Inspector Graham. You are under arrest pursuant to an Interpol red notice and a provisional arrest warrant issued by the Crown Prosecution Service on behalf of the United States Department of Justice." Graham signaled to the uniformed officers. "Get him up." The officers moved in. They weren't gentle. They hauled Vane out of his seat. He stumbled, his legs weak, almost collapsing into the aisle. "Wait!" Vane shouted, finding his voice in a sudden burst of hysteria. He looked around the cabin, his eyes wild. "This is a mistake. Do you know who I am? I am a Tier 1 Platinum traveler. I demand to speak to the American ambassador. This woman," he pointed a shaking finger at Aris, "she set me up. She's a liar." Graham turned to Aris. "Dr. Thorne?" Aris stood up slowly. She stretched her back, hearing a satisfying pop. She pulled her hoodie down, smoothing her hair. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "Inspector," Aris said, handing him the drive. "This contains the audio confession recorded at 35,000 feet, along with the digital copies of the Berlin ledgers I secured yesterday. The chain of custody log is in the root folder." "Excellent," Graham said, pocketing the drive. He looked at Vane with disdain. "Mr. Vane, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence." One of the officers pulled Vane's arms behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the plane. "You can't do this!" Vane screamed as they began to push him toward the door. "I'm Charles Vane. I own this airline. I'll sue you all. I'll buy your precinct and burn it down." "Add threatening a police officer to the file," Graham noted dryly to his colleague. As they dragged Vane past the other passengers, the facade of the elite businessman crumbled completely. He was weeping now, begging the man in 2A for help. John, you know me. Call my wife. Tell her to hide the safe. John!" The man in 2A simply turned his camera to get a better angle, shaking his head in disgust. "I don't know you, pal," he muttered. When Vane was finally maneuvered out the door and onto the metal stairs, the cabin exhaled. It was as if a toxic gas had been cleared from the room. Inspector Graham paused at the door and turned back to Aris. "We have a car waiting to take you to the embassy, Dr. Thorne. We figured you might want to debrief in the morning, but the ambassador insists on seeing you tonight." Aris smiled wearily. "Give me 5 minutes, Inspector. I just need to grab my bag." "Take your time. We aren't going anywhere until the prisoner is secured in the transport van." Graham stepped out. Aris turned back to her seat to retrieve her battered leather duffel. As she lifted it, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Eleanor, the flight attendant. Her eyes were wide, with a mixture of shock and admiration. Eleanor started, then hesitated. "I was terrified of him. He told me he'd have me fired because the ice wasn't square. I didn't know what to do." Aris looked at the young woman. She saw the same look of helplessness she had seen in the passengers at the gate back in New York when Janice was on her rampage. "You did your job, Elena," Aris said gently. "You kept the cabin safe. You notified the captain. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." "But you—" Elena shook her head. "You took him down. Who are you? Really?" Aris slung her bag over her shoulder. She looked at the empty seat where Vane had been sitting, the seat of power that was now just empty upholstery. "I'm just someone who hates bullies," Aris said, "and I really hate people who think the rules don't apply to them." She walked down the aisle. The passengers in the first-class cabin were staring at her. But this time, they weren't looking at her hoodie or her sneakers. They were looking at her face. The businessman in 2A stood up. "Excuse me, miss." Aris stopped. "Yes?" "I saw what happened at the gate in New York," he said, looking shameful. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to get on the flight. I saw that agent treating you like dirt, and I just stood there. And then I heard what this guy said to you." He gestured to the empty seat. "I just want to say, I'm sorry, and thank you." "Thank you," another woman echoed from across the aisle. Aris nodded, acknowledging them. "Next time," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Don't wait for a badge to speak up. Right is right, even if it's wearing a hoodie." She turned and walked out of the aircraft. The cold London air hit her face, crisp and smelling of rain. It was a stark contrast to the recycled air of the cabin. She walked down the stairs, her sneakers squeaking slightly on the metal. At the bottom of the stairs, the spectacle was ending. Charles Vane was being shoved into the back of a police van. He was still shouting, but the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off his protests with a final, definitive thump. Inspector Graham was waiting by a black sedan. "Ready, Dr. Thorne?" Aris looked at the police van driving away, its blue lights reflecting off the wet tarmac. She thought about Janice back in New York, likely sitting in her car in the employee parking lot, realizing her career was over. She thought about the families who had lost loved ones in the fires Vane had profited from. The scales of justice were heavy and often slow, but tonight they had balanced perfectly. "Ready," Aris said. She tossed her bag into the back of the sedan. She took her phone out one last time. She opened the airline app. A notification popped up. "We hope you enjoyed your flight with Royal Horizon Air. How was your experience?" Aris tapped the 5-star rating. Comment: "Excellent in-flight entertainment. The justice was served cold." She climbed into the car, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 days, she let herself truly relax. The mission was done. The bad guys were gone. And tomorrow, she would finally get some sleep. But for now, the quiet hum of the London night was the only sound she needed. The downfall of Charles Vane and the firing of Janice Miller sent shock waves through the airline industry. It wasn't just a viral moment. It became a case study in corporate compliance training worldwide. Aris Thorne proved that authority isn't about the suit you wear, the price of your ticket, or the volume of your voice. It's about integrity, competence, and the quiet power of knowing exactly who you are. Janice judged Aris by her hoodie. Vane judged her by her silence. Both of them paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. In a world obsessed with image, Aris Thorne reminded us all that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you least suspect, the one watching, waiting, and holding all the cards. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who hates bullies and hit subscribe so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments, have you ever been judged by your appearance? I'll see you in the next video.